All right, so let's talk about trend lines. What are trend lines? Basically, trend lines look like this, looks like this, looks like this. Okay, and notice here, every time there's a break of trend, it breaks right here, the stock price went up. There's a break of this trend right here, the stock price went up. There is a break of trend right here of this trend line, right? And then there's a break and then the stock price went up. Okay, so every time there's a trend break, so here's another example, there's a trend break right here. Okay, and there's another break of this trend and then the stock price went up. So we're going to learn how to draw these trends, what to look for, and what's the criteria behind it. Okay, so let's just clean this up chart real quick. It's an Apple chart, so look for Apple daily chart, and you can also do the same thing with me. But let's dig deep inside. So here are the few rules before you draw a trend line. A trend line, very strong and very important thing to know, because all you have to do is just draw a trend and boom, enter the trend break and you get a nice move. Number one rule is trends are always in order to make a trend, you have to realize where are the pivot points. So what are those pivot points? These are the pivot points. You see the pivot, a pivot. A pivot is really where the price goes up and comes down, making a pivot in that process. So price goes up. These are all pivots. Okay. So now look at the price, pivots. You can see pivots, pivot. Okay. And the next thing is all you do is just connect pivot to create a trend line. So let's do that. Connect pivot to pivot. So I see a pivot right here, I see a pivot right here, and I see a pivot right here, and boom, I just connected these three pivots, and boom, that's all it is draw a trend line. Let's draw another one. So I'm gonna zoom it in. I draw one pivot, another pivot, and notice here there's a third pivot already helped me connect it. And guess what happened? Boom, right here there's a trend break. Okay, every time the price came here, it went down, so it formed this trend in the process. Now notice here, when this came right here, people already knew there was a trend, so the price sold off. So it knew, so it actually helps. So the more people know, or the easier it is to draw a trend, the better it is. A lot of people make this mistake of finding complicated trend lines, and complicated setups. But the easier the setup, the more likely it's going to work. The reason why, because more people can see it. If more people can see it, more people will trade it. Okay, so here's another one, trend right here. Let's draw this trend so I can show you some key. Let me see what I can see a trend. We see a trend right here. We just drew. We see there's another trend. Yeah, there's this trend right here. Okay, there's this trend right here. I want to show you an example where I can see a trend and then the test of that trend. I think there's this example, which is a really good one. So there's this trend right here. I draw this connect. Okay, and let's just deep down further. And notice here there was this trend, another second, and then you see there's another. It came right here and sold off. Next thing what it did is broke. Once it broke, two things normally happen. We learned in the last video where if the price breaks resistance, that same resistance becomes support. So now you see here it comes down and actually tests right here the support level, so it becomes support. Actually, if I draw a more clean line trend, you will see exactly that. So if I draw this perfect top, I connect this pivot right here, and you see right here the stock goes up, comes down, it kind of tests this area before it goes up. So a lot of time that same area becomes support. Now the other is there is this horizontal support right here. If you notice, if I draw a line right here, let's just further down. So this is a combination of horizontal and trend. So there's a combination, there's a breakout, you see this horizontal support, so it came right here and booms. So a horizontal and vertical trend. That's when it causes a biggest boom, when there's lots of different kinds of support and resistance acting together at the same time, and they all converge at the same time. Because just think about it, there are people who just draw simple basic support resistance. There are people who draw this trend line support resistance. All those people seeing the same. They're seeing, okay, there's a setup which causes a bigger. So the more support lines come up, or you see them all combining at the same time, the better it is, the more better it works. Okay. Other reasons, the normal common questions that are there, that are very, very common, that I get a lot, is that should we connect this trend to here or here, like to the body or to the wicks? Well, you want to connect to the wicks. Okay, you want to connect to the wicks. You want to connect to the wicks, okay, not the body. That's why I notice it works the best. Now, the other thing is on the trend line is that this is a very, very, very common strategy. Okay, so if that trend line fails, it does fail hard. What do I mean by that? So let's see right here. So there is this trend right here. Okay, so notice here, there's this trend pivot and the stock price breaks. So a lot of people get in right here. Okay, now when it comes down, now the same, what we learned, the same trend or the resistance, which was resistance before, becomes support. So notice here how it's bouncing off this area. However, eventually it fails to go up and it breaks below this resistance area. You see that? And once it does and it cannot hold above it, look what happened. There's a crash. The reason why, because a lot of people who bought right here thinking this trend line will hold, it didn't hold. So what they're gonna do, they can see this trend line, they can see, okay, if this is not holding, they're gonna cut their losses, which means they're gonna sell the stock, causes the stock to come back down. And that's another term for this is called fake breakout. What is fake breakout? A fake breakout is where there is a breakout and then instead of continuing, it fails, it breaks out, and then it doesn't hold and it fails. When that fails, it usually comes with an even bigger sell-off because of the fake. So a lot of people get out of it. Okay. So the other lesson is, the easier the trend setup is, if it fails, usually causes a big sell-off. We're gonna look a lot of more examples later on, but let's just stick to trend lines here in this video. And let's look at another example. So we're going to look at Tesla. I'm just going to pick up all the famous ones. So that's why it's easier to, so you can follow me as well. Tesla, Apple, all these famous stocks. Okay, and it's a daily chart. So it means each candle represents daily. Let's look at next one right here. So I see a trend, boom, right here. So notice here what happened here. Okay, so there's a trend and then it breaks right here. Look what happened. It came up, it could test, it could not. So it failed. And if it fails, where did it come down to? It came down to the next support level. So if I draw right here, so it comes down to this support level right here, and then boom, it goes. So it failed this resistance. Once it fails this trend line, once it fails, comes down to the next support, and then it bounces. So that is why it's really important to understand both of trend lines and resistance levels. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about in the next topic, which is we're gonna combine and you're gonna learn a lot, which is the demand and supply zones, which is what happened here. We're gonna learn that one. It was gonna be really, really cool. But let's look at another trend lines right here, which is also very famous. I actually remember I took this trade. There was this trend line right here. There was this nice trend break line. So there was this trend, boom. And once it broke above this trend line, you see how it broke and it tested this level. So it broke above this, it comes down, tests this level or this trend line, and then it bounces off, and then there it goes. Okay, so very, very important to understand. Here's another trend line right here. And once it breaks, okay, and then it goes and looks, it comes down the same area where it broke off from, and then it goes again, which we're going to talk about in the next chapter. So now here's what I want you to do. I want you to go and pick up all those famous stock, for example, SPY, and then just open the chart and then just start drawing support and resistance and see what happened. Okay, see what happened. So draw this support right here, draw this trend line right here. Okay, just keep drawing, go and just keep drawing trend lines and see what happens, how the stock reacted. Look how perfectly it happened in SPY. Broke down, it hit, and literally just perfect right here. Okay, and then once it failed, which is what I talked about, once it failed, there's a huge sell-off. Okay, so learn to draw these trend lines. So go in there. So I used to go like all this, and I've done this hundreds of thousands of times. I just go and find trends. I go find trends. I just keep looking at charts, and I see, and that's how you're gonna learn different kinds of resistance levels. Okay, sometimes you will see, oh, there was this trend I drew, it did not work. Look how it did not work. What did I do wrong? And we're gonna talk about this in the next lesson, and you're gonna learn all of it. But there's another trend, and then once it broke, boom, it worked really well. Here's another trend right here. So there's a trend. If I draw trend like this, kinda, and then it broke out, and then it went continue up. There's another trend like this right here, and now it's breaking out. Okay, there's another trend right here. So as soon as you draw and see how it happened, did you draw it right? Did you not draw it right? What would you have done? So that's your next one. So remember, if you really want to get good at it, all it needs is a good screen time. What I mean by screen time is that the more charts you see, the better you're gonna get. And I'm gonna show you some nice tricks in the next few videos. But that's number one. Understand pivot levels. Okay. Number two, do lots of horizontal and vertical support lines, which is trend lines. Okay. Draw as many as possible. The more pivots, the number third is the more pivots you see, like one in this case, for example, you see 1, 2, 3 kinda, and then you see how it held out here, it tested, and boom, it continued. The more pivots you see, the better it is, the better it's gonna work. And the key is to find, obviously the key is to find it before it happens, right? Like if it already broke out and it already made this trend and it broke out, now it's not worth it. But you have to know before, so you have to be prepared before. So that's number 4. So the more you're gonna see it, the more you're gonna practice it, the better the trend lines you're gonna see. And yeah, the more screens, the better. So that's it for this video, and we're gonna go to the next demand and supply. Take care.